This is Saskia, and this is Note to Self, your weekly dose of everything that's simply too long to text. Consider this your personal invitation into my inner circle, where I share my thoughts, feelings, and quiet reflections that usually live inside my Notes app. Thanks for joining me. Hello, my fellow Note to Self listeners. Welcome to the pod. Happy to be back this week, feeling much more settled than I was last week. My dad is doing really well. He was discharged from the hospital, and I am leaving tomorrow to go see him in Miami. And I have my cousin's wedding, but it's going to be really nice to see him and just feeling so much lighter and happier that he's good, just grateful that he is in my life and that he's healthy and happy. But yeah, it's kind of wild because I didn't really go into tons of details, but he had a blocked carotid artery, and it's kind of crazy like when they're clearing it, because essentially it's blocking blood flow to the brain. He's like feeling so much clearer, has better like recall, and it's just like wild to think like how long this might have been affecting him. Just the human body, man. It's a crazy, crazy thing. But anyways, other than Dad doing better, I've had my younger cousin visiting from Australia. So she has been here with Jeffrey and I, staying with us for the last about maybe 5 days, I think. We all leave tomorrow for Miami. And I was realizing when she came that I have not had a visitor in New York in so long. I mean, we've had like friends come in for the day, or friends who I've caught up for dinner, but I haven't had someone stay with me and really being, the host in such a long time. And she was our first guest here. So she was the marker for wanting to get all our artwork up and making the apartment very cute. And I had her and my other cousin over for dinner on her first night here. I had a little gift bag for her with some little goodies for her arrival. I was like, she's my first guest. I want to make it really special. So it's been really nice, but it's so funny when you haven't had a visitor in ages, because I think so often at the start, I had a lot of friends visiting, but I've been here like almost, I guess it's 10 years since I moved here. I think I've lived here like 8.5 or something, because I had that 1.5 hiatus. But I feel like at the start I had, more visitors, and you're kind of playing tourist, but you're also exploring the city yourself. And not having had someone so long, it was kind of a funny, what's the right word? It was like a funny role to get back into of the tour guide. And I was, being the way I was putting it is being a tourist in your own city. That's it. And I was trying to think of like what to do with her. And my initial thought was so rogue. For those who live in New York, you will think that this is so stupid. So it's the middle of winter here. And in my head, I'm like, why don't we go to Red Hook? And for anyone that lives here, Red Hook is like a summer spot. They know this, those who don't. It's down by the water in South Brooklyn. I actually have never been, and I've always wanted to go. That's why I had it on the top of my list. But Jeffrey and my other cousin were like, what the fuck, Saskia? That's such a random idea to take her to Red Hook when it's freezing cold out, and there's just so many other things to do. So my like regular tour guide cap was clearly out of practice. So I stuck to, my go-tos. We hopped around Soho one day in my old neighborhood, which was also really nice to be back and wandering around those streets. And like that used to be my local, and I always loved being around there. And I took her to some cute little cocktail bars I like in that area. And then we went to a Broadway show, which I think you have to do in the city. I'm a big Broadway girly, and we saw Moulin Rouge because it ends on Broadway soon, and I've been wanting to see it. It's such a fun show. It's one of my fave movies, and the Baz Luhrmann Moulin Rouge with Nicole Kidman and Ewan McGregor. And one of my all-time favorite like musical songs is Elephant Love Medley. So I was really pumped to see that song live. And it's a mashup of 19 different love songs all into this one song. And every time we go to like musical theater bars, it's always the song I request. I know all the lyrics. It kicks off like this, guys. I'll give you a little taste. Love is a many splendid thing. Love lifts us up where we belong. All you need is love. Please don't start that again. All you need is love. A girl has got to eat. All you need is love, or she'll end up on the streets. All you need is love. Whoa. Love is just a game. If Kat was here, that would have driven her fucking mental. But I did it for you guys. Anyways, that is the start of it. There's two people. It's Ewan McGregor and Nicole Kidman. And then it goes into this whole medley of love songs. I know every single word. The beginning, I even my intonations are the same. You guys have to go listen to it. So it starts out like that. And I'm like, I had preemptively told my cousin, I'm like, this song is amazing. You're going to fucking love it. So I'm holding her hand. I'm like squeezing her hand. I'm like, yeah, this is it. And then it transitions, I swear to God, into like a Chainsmokers song. I was like, what the fuck? I look over at her and she realizes that something must have changed. I was so fucking pissed. I cannot tell you. And really killed me. I was like ready to sing every lyric to that goddamn song and probably drive the people around me mental. But look, guys, who needs to go to the show when you have me? If you want it, I'll do the whole song for you. And actually what's funny is times that I've even gone to like do karaoke, I've put that song on and my friends always laugh because they're like, you do both parts. Like it's meant to be a duet, but I sing both. Please just send help. Anyways, I digress. It was still an amazing show. Bob the drag queen is one of the leads. He plays the man who owns the theater. And I did not know he was in it, so I was pumped about that. And it was just like such a fun girls' night. They had the cute little like mini Moe bottles. So we had some champagne and then we had a late dinner at this spot in downtown Manhattan I love that's called Casino. And it's this really fun Italian spot. And then the next day I took her around Fort Greene and Prospect Heights and we biked to Williamsburg and I did like my favorite little vintage crawl where I take my visitors to some of my favorite vintage shops. And then tonight we're going to do jazz and comedy in West Village. So I think I've done a pretty good job being a tour guide. She seems to have had a great time. And it was fun to kind of bop around and go to the places I used to love showing people, but then also having like known new places that I love. And I had this like moment of reflection as we were walking around Williamsburg of just how confident I feel in the city and navigating it. And she was kind of asking me like where feels like home. And I had mentioned kind of, my home always feels connected to where my parents are, but the home that feels the most like I've created is New York. And I think that's why it's always is hard for me to think about moving, albeit I travel a lot, so I'm not always here. But there's something about, there's like a comfort to this city. Whenever I come home, I just always feel like I know where I am. I know how to get around. It feels like my city. And that's something that is really special. And it's fun when you have a visitor here and you can really be that guide for them. So I recommend taking days to be a tourist in your own city, going to galleries, to shows, like especially depending on what your city has to offer. New York has the best theater in the world and some of the best art galleries. Like it's silly not to go. I go to a lot of music, which I love, but I think there's little things that we can spend more time doing, and some that don't, like, a lot of the galleries for people who live in this city are actually free. So there's so many things that you can do that don't cost money as well. And it was just really nice to find some comfort in how well I know my areas of New York, because there's still so much more to explore. And having visitors kind of really like also sets a marker to think about how far you've come since the last time when I first moved here. So that's been my week. And on top of that, it's been a big week for pop culture, guys. Big week. Two things I need to talk about. I would be remiss not to talk about them because, as I'm sure you have now all realized, I really love pop culture. So Traitors. Traitors season finale. You guys know that I love this show. And my God, this season, I always do chef's kiss, but it really was. I've spoken about this on the pod before, and I will be mentioning a spoiler because it's already ended. So you guys either pause and skip a few minutes or you're going to hear it. But Rob Rausch, I think that's how you say his last name. I realize I've never really said it. I just call him Rob from Love Island. But he played, what a freaking incredible game, man. He was so entertaining to watch. He won Traitors in the end. So well deserved. I'm so glad he won. He needed to win. And he just used this like quiet demeanor, which wasn't always there, but I think he has a very calm, quiet energy. And I think he himself has said most of his life he's been underestimated, and people just look at him as like a hot, like kind of dumb guy. And he's like, I actually am not. And I think he played into that character kind of similar to what Gabby Windey, who won last season, she kind of played into this like, I'm just like a dumb airhead kind of thing, but she actually has a ton of depth and is super smart. But people underestimate you, and being underestimated in that game is a strength. So all the players just put this insane amount of trust in him, and he was ruthless in self-preservation. Like, he was not in it. He was in it to win it. It wasn't about friends and relationships. It was, but he was okay to turn his stab them in the back, which is what he ultimately had to do. And I think it was really interesting to see how he like inadvertently planted ideas in other players' heads. And he was just always like 10 steps ahead of everyone. And I just found it so fascinating to watch, because you could see when he was making decisions how it was going to impact him and the game. And I think he really played it as a gamer. And that's how it's meant to be played. It is called Traitors. And when I watched the reunion, I really loved the people in the game who have not held this against him, because as you shouldn't. Like, it's a game. This isn't real life. And I feel like a lot of them, majority of them, really love Rob and commend him for what he did. But yeah, I just thought it was so, so well done. One of my all-time favorite lines of the show was, I think it was 3 episodes ago, when he turned Eric. So what happens is, if there's only one traitor left, it's like midway through the show, they have the opportunity to turn someone and offer them to become a traitor, one of the faithfuls. And they can either accept it, or if they don't, they die. So he turns this very unassuming, sweet guy called Eric into a traitor. And when that happened, like, Eric was just so dumbfounded that it was Rob who was the traitor. And he said something like, wait, we have to kill someone tonight? Because Rob was like, we're going to have to go kill someone. And he's like, yeah, it's kind of our job. And it was just the way he said it. He just was he just seemed like a random dude they pulled off the street. And I watched him in Love Island, so I knew who he was. But he was just so himself and unfazed. And I think that's what made him so delightful to watch, because he was very relatable. But the ending, so those who don't watch the show, you're going to have to bloody Google how the whole show works. But essentially, at the very end, the goal of the whole show is the faithfuls have to get out the traitors. You never know how many traitors there are. And every night there's like a round table where they vote people off, and then the person who gets voted off is able to say if they're faithful or a traitor. So you're able to start to kind of figure out how many traitors might be left. But the last, I think, 2 round tables, or the last round table, sorry, they don't say if they're faithful or a traitor, the person who gets voted out. So you're left in this kind of unknown of, are the last 4 people left, are any of us traitors? We don't know. Or any of us faithfuls. And it's really this guessing game. If there's one traitor left in the final and they don't vote them out, they get all the money. And then if it's all faithfuls, they split the money. If there's one faithful, they take all the money. So what had happened, it ended up with the 4. They did a vote. They got someone out. And then it was just Eric, Rob, and Maura. And Maura has been in it from the beginning. She's another Love Island star. Love her. She's amazing. And she very much trusted Rob from the very beginning. She barely knew him. She does kind of some hosting for Love Island US. But I think as she mentioned post-show, you have very little to go on when you start. So like the housewives all stick together. So the women who are from the Real Housewives franchise, they all stick together. The gamers tend to stick together, the ones that are from game shows. And for her, it was her and Rob from Love Island. So she kind of just put her trust in him. And as she should have, because the whole game, he backed her. He always had her. And as he said at the very end, he was like, Maura's the final piece. He said, she's my queen. And she really was. The whole game was relying on her still believing him. And at the very last one, he ends up betraying Eric, and they vote Eric out because Maura was convinced Eric was a traitor. So she had said to Rob, pinky promise, like, we have to vote Eric out if we're going to vote the person out that he wanted to vote out, which was the other woman. So he knew he was going to get rid of both of them. And Rob, like, pinky promises her, like, yep, it's you and me to the end, picks her up, twirls her around. Then they walk off holding hands. It was like a bloody love story, guys. You were rooting for them so hard. So she really believed it was him. And then at the very end, it's the two of them left and they have to say, are you a faithful or traitor? Moira's like, I'm a faithful. And then he's like, I'm a traitor. And I have never seen like that pure shock and just heartbreak. It was devastating. I felt so bad for this poor woman. And I listened again to the recap afterwards, and she was saying the reason I was just honestly couldn't speak was because I kept waiting for him to say I'm joking, and he didn't. But honestly, Maura, we were all putty in his hands. Everyone in the show was, the audience was. I would have fallen for that shit so hard. That beautiful man looking at me saying everything is going to be okay. Take me on the journey, Rob. Take me. You've got me. It was so entertaining though. And thankfully Maura is such a good sport. And she has said to Rob she's fine because he's going to buy her Birkin bag with part of his money. So I love that for her, queen. But ultimately, it was such a fun season to watch. I love that show. I love the relationships in it. I love the gameplay. I think it's so interesting. And I love that Rob won because I think out of a lot of them, he's never, from what I can tell, he doesn't seem to be chasing fame at all. After Love Island, when they did the spinoff show, he wasn't in it. And I'm sure he was asked to be in it. He just kind of went back to his property and lived his little, country life. He said with the money, he wants to help his family and buy a property and just live a quiet life. And I love that for him. I'm like, you probably out of all of them deserved it the most then, because you genuinely want to use it to help your family and, probably needed it. So I really thought it was lovely, and it's been cute seeing him. He's like been bopping around New York as they've been doing their like post-show press tour, and he's wearing the Ice Out badge. Love that for him. And just cool to see him like more in like the New York pop culture scene rather than just, he's expanded upon Love Island. And I think the reason, again, he did so well is he was authentic. And that when you are authentic, it bleeds through. People recognize it. It's like an instinctual thing, I think. It's like a feeling of when someone's being fake or not. And there's something beautiful about that. And I just really enjoyed it. Which brings me to my next pop culture moment of the week, which should we be surprised what I talk about? Because apparently I just talk about the same thing all the time. SNL, Connor Storrie. Oh my God. Connor Storrie, for those who are forgetting who he is, he plays Ilya in Heated Rivalry. And he hosted on SNL. So it's really rare that SNL books breakout stars to host. I was intrigued by this, so I did some Googling, because I was like, I've rarely seen breakout stars. And I think there was 5 maybe that they've listed in a long time. The most recent was Reggie Jean Page, who was this lead in season 1 of Bridgerton. And he got booked when that show was blowing up. And that was kind of his big breakout role. So really uncommon for them to bring on a star that's so new. So huge deal. And he fucking killed it. And I'm not being biased here. I'm a big SNL fan. Jeffrey and I watch it every week. We often are even coming up with bits in our own life about funny shit that we think would be great bits on SNL. Ugh, I would love to work on that show. It'd be so fun. But yeah, so we watch it religiously, and you really can see the difference in hosts. Some hosts are more confident. Some you can tell are nervous. They still are amazing, but you can see ones that are more comfortable in this format than others. As soon as Connor stepped out, he just was exuding confidence. I did not feel any fear from him. I didn't see any markers of that. He just seemed so confident, like he was just meant to be there. And it was actually, it kind of reminded me a little of Rob. Very different people, but in terms of the relatability, I think Connor is a very different person to him. He exudes this kindness and just such gentle energy. He has this wonder that I think is really beautiful, and it feels like he's just so excited with everything he does. And that is just such a beautiful thing to see. And I feel like, again, why people relate to him so hard. So he did an incredible job. my favorite sketch that I wanted to call out was the final one of the night. There was actually another one I loved, but this one I think is really interesting. So he played this injured stripper. So the female cast members were on their bachelorette party in Vegas, and he comes in as this like male stripper they've got for the night, but he's just been in a car accident. So I fucking love SNL. This is so unhinged. So he's like crawling in. Anyways, the character was actually a character he developed himself doing his like clown and improv stuff in LA. He went to clown school and he did a ton of improv in LA and in a theater there. I can't remember the main theater for improv in LA, but there's always like Chicago, LA, and New York are really known for their like improv theaters. And that's where a lot of SNL actors actually come from. So this was a character he had come up with, and this sketch out of all of them felt the most him. He was really free, and I think he could really show the breadth of his talent. And this is, you could see he knows this format. He can do this type of work. I mean, I think he can do anything because he's so talented. But the physicality was hysterical. Just the way he moved his body, it was so so beautiful, but just so amazing to watch. And I thought what was really interesting is, depending on the host, a lot of the time the SNL cast kind of carry these sketches, right? And they're kind of the crazy out there characters. Not always the case at all. It depends on the actor and if they're like more comfortable. But Connor, this was him. This was all him. He nailed it. He carried the whole thing. And it was so fun to just see him really throw himself into this wild sketch that he had come up with. And they took that and wanted to run with it more. And I just love that they built off something that he had already created himself. And when I was watching it, all I could think was, just this man is coming back. And this will be his first hosting of SNL. But I see him as being one of the like celebrity or actor hosts that they bring back. And you're looking back and, the next 25th anniversary, I think they just had the 50th, so what would be that their 75th anniversary, and he'll be one of the people that will have hosted multiple times since then. He's just made to do this, and it was so fun because you feel like you're just seeing a star rising, and I have loved every second of his journey. And also shout out to Hudson appearing as well, the other lead from Heated Rivalry. It was so cute. Loved seeing them together. He's also so hot. In Heated Rivalry, I was like, oh, he's cute. But in real life, whew, that man, that energy. I don't know what he is doing, but he has this like very captivating energy as well. And he like exudes sex appeal. I think Connor as Ilya in Heated Rivalry exudes sex appeal, but in real life he exudes like sweetness. And then Hudson was the opposite. It was like sweetness in the show, but like pure sex appeal in real life. It's so interesting. But anyways, let's dive into the topic at hand, guys, because you know me, I could talk about Heated Rivalry for bloody ever. So I wanted to try something a little different. I had someone send in a question, and I thought I could do a kind of ask me anything advice section, just here and there whenever questions pop in. So I thought I'd dive in. I have 2 questions that I was sent, so I thought I would give a little advice to some of our listeners. And look, I am not a therapist or anything like that, but I'm just sharing things that I feel like I've learned and maybe how I might approach things. Take it with a grain of salt. No one is totally right or wrong, but maybe it's just another way to look at things. And also, again, always down to hear other people's perspectives on things, because the best thing we can do is share how we feel about things and take people's opinions into account, because I think it really opens up your mind and how you feel about certain questions or certain maybe problems that are going on in your life. So the first one I'll dive into, I'm going to do 2 today. I feel like I've outgrown one of my closest friends. She hasn't done anything wrong, but we're not aligned anymore. Is it okay to let it go? So I can actually relate to this pretty hard. I've been finding, especially in now kind of reaching my mid-30s, I'm reflecting a lot more on the people in my life and our value systems. And I think I'd said in my ins and outs episode, a few episodes ago that one of my ins for 2026 was your time is like diamonds, treat it as such, and only share it with those who bring you joy. So that's been sticking with me a lot as I think about what I want to do this year, and having a lot of friends that live in the city, but also a lot of friends that don't. And, who do I, want to make time to go visit or go on trips with, and really taking time to make time for the people that are important to me, and giving myself time as well, because I do tend to fill my life with a lot of commitments. But I think the questions I started to ask myself were like, am I staying in this friendship out of history or alignment? And do I feel energized or depleted after seeing them? And I think all of this is easier said than done, because you can answer those questions. But as this person has asked me, if it's one of your closest friends and you have a lot of history, it can be really hard. And I can say 2 stories of things that I kind of went through with what I call friendship breakups. And I don't think we discuss or acknowledge friendship breakups as much as we should. Just like our romantic partners, not all our friends are meant to be in our lives forever. And some, I like to think, are just here for a season. And same with romantic partners. But we don't look at our friendships like this. I think we just have them and they're here forever, but we don't treat them as such as we would romantic relationships. Like, I think friendship breakups don't get as much time and space as probably a romantic breakup does. And one of my scenarios where I probably handled this badly, and I'll share two stories, was in 2020. I went through my actual first probably friendship breakup. So this woman was one of my closest friends in New York. But I constantly had this I was trying to think of the word, and I came up with belittled, and I think there was elements of that, but it wasn't entirely that. It was kind of hard to explain. It was just this energy where I felt like there was a competition in a way underneath everything. And I oftentimes didn't really feel supported by her, because I think she was really focused on finding out what she wanted to do. And I don't think she realized that inadvertently by doing that, she was kind of hurting me and what my dreams were. So there was just this weird energy there. And ultimately, when I asked myself the question of did I feel more uplifted with her? Sometimes yes, but there was a lot of times I felt very sad. And, during the beginning of COVID, my younger sister and I went to stay with my older sister who lives in Georgia. So we got out of the city, and I'm ashamed to admit, but I kind of used that as a time to almost ghost her, this friend. And I kind of stopped replying. And I remember when I came back to the city, I never really reached out. And we did end up seeing each other a few months later, and I kind of shared how I felt, but I think I wasn't as communicative as I could have been. And I don't remember intentionally being I'm going to ghost my friend. I remember just kind of pulling back and never really explaining why. And I think that is a form of ghosting, even if it wasn't intentional. And ultimately, a lot of it was just me not wanting to handle the situation. I was uncomfortable. I didn't know how to share what I was feeling. And that is how not to handle this. So don't ghost your friends. And even if we did meet up and talk about it, I just think I reflect on this situation being she deserved more, despite feeling like she had let me down in scenarios and I was upset and angry with her. Everyone deserves to have, answers. So for me, that's the example of what not to do. Now, more recently, I had a situation with another long-term friend arise, and ultimately it really came down to just realizing our values are a little different. I still love her, and I think I always will, but we're just different people. Our lives have grown in different directions, and I started to think that I might have valued the friendship a little more than she did. And I haven't necessarily let the friendship go, but I think I started to again reflect on where I want to spend my time. And unfortunately, it isn't somewhere I want to dedicate time to right now. So I picked myself, and I communicated that with her. So I think really the answer to my question of how to deal with a situation like this is communication. you wouldn't ghost your long-term partner, so speak to your friend and share how you're feeling. And I think using the tactic of like a compliment sandwich is how I always approach things like this. You're not lying, but say how much you valued the friendship, because that isn't a lie. That is there. She's still your friend. You still value that. And despite the fact that you feel like you're growing apart, that doesn't negate what had previously been a part of that friendship. And then I think stating the fact that you do feel like you're growing apart and that your lives are going in different directions and that your value systems are changing, and that's okay. Not one value system is better over the other. It's just you're changing. And instead of us feeling like this need, like we have to hang out with people because we have history, or then we start to feel guilty because we're kind of pulling away without saying anything, you state exactly what's happening. And I think it's better to acknowledge it, so then it takes the pressure off both of you. And it also doesn't mean that the friendship is over. You may come back together and find each other again. You just don't know where life will take you. And I think that to me is the best way to approach it, is honestly a conversation, and it'll take the stress off you as well. And there were two things that I kind of had to ask myself too, is, am I afraid of the conversation or am I afraid of the outcome? Because ultimately, a friendship breakup, you're going to have mourning, and the outcome might be loss. And that's really sad. And giving yourself space like a breakup to allow yourself to feel that. And also asking, have I outgrown them or have I just grown differently? And I think both are okay. If you've outgrown someone, that's also all right. But if you've just grown in a different way, that also might mean you could come back together, But just questions that you can ask yourself to see and really get to the bottom of what is it that you're feeling here. And something that a friend said to me many years ago that I've always really appreciated is that she said, our friendship is not dependent on the amount of time we spend together. And maybe that started to get me thinking about friendship breakups, and maybe friendships that are just a season, or maybe, like you said, you'll find your way back to each other, or you just pick up where things left off. Ultimately, if it is something that is not meant to be for both of you right now, that doesn't have to affect the future where you might come back together. But I think if you continue down a path where you're forcing a friendship, that's where the issues can arise. Exactly. In my case, with the first situation, I never communicated how I actually felt, and then kind of just didn't want to deal with it. And then it created a bit of a toxic situation where I'm still not friends with this person to this day, and have never communicated really how I was feeling in the long run. So I think ultimately, really the answer is treat it like a breakup. There isn't really ever a right way to do a breakup, I guess, other than communicating how you feel. And I'd suggest just speaking from your heart, and don't come to the conversation from the perspective of you did this, your values are this, you're changing, but share where you're at and how you feel like you're changing, and not to say that one way is right or the other, but more it's something that you're noticing. So yeah, that's where I would wrap things up on the friendship level. Let me know how it goes. I'm intrigued. And let's just talk more about friendship breakups, guys. I really think we need to make that part of the vernacular, because it's wild to me that it's not something that is discussed all the time. Now, question number 2, pivoting, bit of a different topic here. I've been seeing a married man for almost a year. He says he's unhappy and planning to leave, but he hasn't. I know this isn't the woman I want to be, but I also feel deeply connected to him. How do I walk away from something that feels real? Girl, I feel for you. Again, not proud to admit it. Guys, I should have had a podcast when I was single. I had some crazy single stories. I unfortunately have had 2 affairs in my life where I was the other woman. One lasted for just over a year, and he was saying the same thing, that he wasn't happy in his relationship and that they were essentially, separated, but they were staying together for their kids. He never said he was going to leave. So I always kind of kept him at arm's length, and I never expected him to leave. I was also very young, in my mid-20s, and he was 10 years, 15 years older than me. And it was just it was a fantasy. We only ever hung out in, beautiful hotels that he'd stay at in New York. And it was all a fantasy. And ultimately, I think he wanted me to include him more in my life, but I didn't understand why I would do that if I wasn't included in his life, because all of it was not real, And that's kind of what ended up making it fall apart. And my second experience was definitely harder because I really did have strong feelings for this person. Not that I didn't with the first one, but I knew it wasn't going to be what it was going to be. The second one, it only lasted a few months, and I truly thought he was my person. And I had such deep feelings for him. I felt this insane past life connection where I knew something was going to happen the moment I met him. And this was definitely the hardest to walk away from, because I think probably what you're feeling as well is that you feel so deeply connected. It's really hard to walk away. And look, I hold a lot of guilt for both scenarios. I don't think it would be something I would do now, but I've had to also tell myself, and a lot of friends have said this to me, and everyone looks at this differently, but I wasn't the one cheating, and you're not the one cheating. And the blame should be held with the person who is in the relationship. So to start, try and not be hard on yourself. Love is so complicated. It can blind you. So take it easy on yourself, coming from someone who sometimes doesn't with these, when I think back to these scenarios. I can say from my experience, though, that I really wish I had walked away sooner. The one that was longer felt less, I have less guilt towards it because of how he positioned his situation to me, but also who knows if that was the truth. The second situation I do feel bad about. And I think when it happened a second time, I had to look at myself and go, why do I keep attracting unavailable men? And all of it came down to my attachment styles and my own self-worth. And I think when I started to really reflect on it was like most of my relationships have been with avoidant men, and it was all I knew. So this to me felt like it was, meant to be. And the addiction to the intensity, where and never knowing where they stand, like constantly questioning, and that intense feeling, which was anxiety, it was driving me mad, but I felt like it was what it was meant to be like. And I think when I ended the second affair, it was heartbreaking, but I could feel myself falling apart. I felt myself losing my mind. And I knew in that moment I could not keep doing this to myself. And I deserved a lot better. And I remember forcing myself to be like, you need to end it today. And I asked him to meet me in this park in New York City. And I just put it all out on the table about how I felt. And essentially was just like, either, you're ending your relationship or I'm walking away. And it was never going to happen. He was never going to leave his wife. So I walked away. And I'm really fucking glad I did, because in hindsight, I think the connection I had there was blinded by the anxious attachment style. And I don't necessarily know if it was love, or rather I'd fallen in love with the idea of who we could be. And I do think there was some crazy past life connection there, because I've felt that before. But I also think just because you feel a connection with someone, it doesn't mean you have to act on it. And I started to think about a few different questions as I was going through this, and things that maybe you can ask yourself is, what did I actually think I was getting from this relationship? Because in my situation, and likely in any affair, you're only getting half a person, maybe less. And that's when you have to ask yourself, what do you think I deserve? What do you think you deserve? Because you deserve the whole of someone. And I had to ask myself also, is it love or is it validation? And for me, I desperately wanted a partner. So I think a lot of these scenarios were validation, that I could maybe be picked. And did I actually want him, or did I just want to be chosen? So there's a lot of things that you can ask yourself here that help to clarify the feelings and if it is really something that is for you. And unfortunately, some of the takeaways I've had is I don't think affairs can really be for you. So the first one I think, and I mentioned this before, you can only get so much of a person when you're in an affair. You may think you know the depths of them, but if they're hiding you, they're hiding elements of themselves. And that was something that really stuck with me, as I said to myself, wow, I actually don't know really who this person is. Number 2 is, I again mentioned this before, but I fell in love with the idea of what our life would be rather than the reality, because the reality was secretive and I would never have known what the relationship would actually be like until he was out of the affair and could be with me. And that will not happen until, that happens. And why am I waiting around for that, And I think that's why it's dangerous to be like, oh, they're going to leave. They're going to leave. I think if they're going to leave, you leave and wait for that to happen away from all of this, because it's a fantasy that you're currently living in. A big one was, just because you have a deep connection to someone, it doesn't mean they're the one. I don't think you're bound to one connection per life. I just do not believe that inherently. I believe that you choose who you want to be with, and I believe there are many people out there for us. I often think, and at least in my personal experience, that when you feel a deep connection, it's either a past life thing where you've met again in this lifetime to heal something from your past, or it is trauma. I'm sorry. Those are like my 2 takeaways, honestly, for that intense, deep connection. Feels like you've known them forever. Because it reminds me of something Jay Shetty said about the different types of relationships. And one of them he spoke about was the candle, where it's really hot, but ultimately it burns out. I think that's a lot of the time what this trauma response is, where it's this intensity that you kind of feel addicted to. So even though you may feel connected to them, remind yourself that there's other people out there for you. And unfortunately, this person is unavailable. So I don't think they are for you, at least not right now. And ultimately, the last piece was you get back what you put out. So by continuing with an unavailable man, waiting for them to leave their partner and choose you, this becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, because you need to choose you. And until you choose you, someone else won't. And that was a realization I had to have, where I was like, I'm taking scraps, and what am I doing? Because I need to put myself first and realize that I deserve more, and I won't continue accepting scraps. I'm just done. And I had this like big realization where I was like, no more scraps. And I was so sick of saying just yes to it, because I felt a connection. And walking away was so hard, but it was so liberating. And I really felt like I chose myself. And I really also believe you're truly meant to be with this person, he needs to figure out his situation in his own timeline. And if he's truly meant to be with you, he will, and you will find each other once all of that is sorted out. And it's not fair on you, on the other people in the relationship, to be continuing something where you're all hurting each other. Step away and let them figure out their side of the piece if it's truly meant to happen. And if it doesn't work out, you don't deserve a half person, and you'll find a full person for you anyways. And we all make mistakes. I was hesitant to bring this up because I think some people, and even bring up my own scenarios of cheating, that's what I was hesitant to bring up, because I think some people can be really judgmental, and I don't want people to think I'm like a bad person, or that, I started to feel like guilty again. But I had to remind myself, like, we are not perfect. We have all hurt someone in our life, and that does not justify it by any means. But I think we make mistakes, and the best thing you can do is reflect on those mistakes and choose to not do that again. Albeit I did it twice, but I was also in my 20s and my early 30s, so give myself a break. But I think my biggest thing was, I do feel like I've become a better person from that, and I choose to not do that again. And the best thing we can do, I guess, is be honest about our mistakes and take accountability, because maybe when we try and hide them, it makes other people feel like, that they shouldn't share what they did. I think there's always something to learn in these experiences, and trusting that there is something to learn, and then, choosing yourself. And what's interesting is, after this scenario, I did take a lot of time to really look at what I was doing, because this was me. I kept attracting these types of people, and I knew there was something here for me. And I worked on it on therapy and really did start to unpack like my relationship with my dad and, my own attachment styles and why, if I kept saying yes to these people, I was going to keep attracting like half people that were giving me nothing. And I remember I went to my uncle's property in the middle in Florida, and I sat out on his dock in the middle of nature, and I wrote a list of the type of man I wanted to meet. I can't remember if I've told this story on the podcast before or not. And I sat there and I meditated and I like spoke out loud what I wanted. And I remember I yelled out into like the forest. I was like, send me someone good or don't send me anyone at all. And I had written on my list, I want someone who is available and single. I was like, I need to be clear. I have to stop attracting these unavailable men. And then a few days later, I matched with Jeffrey on Raya, and here we are. And I also have realized I was in a very early stage and probably still mourning what I had let go. But and I've had to kind of work through that too. But I think that change of energy really brought someone new that was actually there and wanting to be there for me. So all I can say to you is to walk away. And how to walk away is you got to choose yourself, girl. And you got to trust that if it's meant to be, it will work out. But right now, stop putting yourself through it. It's not fair on you. It's not fair on his relationship. And it's just all of it is, it's just never going to end the way you want it to end. So I feel for you. I'm here for you. And again, message me if you want to talk more about it. So I think those are my 2 questions. And as I was like concluding my thoughts for this week, I was coming back to what I kicked off with, which was being a tourist in your own city. And I realized something that I think just in life generally, it's easy just to go on autopilot and you stick to your routine and what's comfortable and known. We keep seeing the same people, making the same choices, playing the same roles. But sometimes maybe we need to step back and look at our life the way a visitor would. And asking yourself, what's interesting to you? What feels right? Whether this is a friendship you've outgrown or a relationship that might not be serving you. And instead of just going along, like ask yourself these questions. And I think if we look at our life through the perspective of an outsider, it really helps you be more honest with yourself. And I think it helps you choose you. And not always doing that, but in these types of scenarios and these questions that have been sent through, stepping back and saying, what is this actually serving me? And if I was an outsider viewing this, what would I tell that person to do? And ultimately, I always say, be kind to yourself. I've made countless mistakes. I've ghosted instead of communicating. I've stayed in relationships that weren't aligned, and I've loved many men I should not have loved. But every experience has taught me something about self-worth, and I really realized that you get back what you tolerate. And the moment you start choosing yourself, everything starts to change. And it's choosing yourself. This is an important caveat, not from ego, not from pride, but I think from clarity. And, I think choosing yourself can sometimes be like associated with being selfish. And that's a very important distinction because, you don't want to be selfish. But like I said, choosing yourself, not from ego, but really like sitting with what is right for you. And I personally feel like that's something I'm trying to do more and more. And these questions were really interesting because they were very poignant to stuff I had been thinking about myself. So thank you for sharing them. And as mentioned, if there's other things that people want to talk about or topics, advice sections, please DM them to me on social. I'm also going to post an AMA question box on Instagram every now and then. So if you want to be anonymous, which these were anonymous, obviously, but if you don't want, even me to know your name, please do. I'll have that out open as well. And really, I just hope you liked today's episode. I know it was a different format. I'm trying different formats, and I look forward to seeing you guys all next week. Okay. Thanks all. Oh, and like and subscribe. Tell you what's helps the podcast. Go do it right now. Rate on Spotify. 5 stars, please, if you love it. Thank you. And then write a review on Apple. It's really helpful to circulate the podcast more on those platforms, and it would mean so much to me. So please and thank you, do that. Anyways, I'll speak to you soon. Thanks all. Bye.